Welcome to a new episode of Islam and Christian Eschatology. I promise it will be exciting and eye-opening to you. Till now, we studied that the last empire of the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar signified a neo-Islamic empire. Click on the info card on the top right corner of this video to watch the playlist. In this episode, we will investigate what is being taught about the end times in Islamic eschatological circles. And once we understand the Islamic belief about the end times, we can make a fair assessment about the party of the Antichrist. What do you see in this picture? A car that was involved in a head-on collision with another vehicle. A head-on collision occurs when one of the parties to the accident did something which is abnormal. Look at this drone footage of a city traffic. I have highlighted the place where there is a possibility of a collision. However, we have no possibility of a head-on collision. None of those intersections allow for such an event where one car can go and ram into another oncoming car. The only way a head-on collision can happen is an intentional violation of traffic rules and driving a car opposite to the flow of the traffic. Welcome to the world of Islamic orientation. Observe Muslims and the teachings of Islam. You cannot miss out the orientation. From the very beginning, Islam demands you to think in the reverse. Probably this is coming from a passage in the book of Genesis where Ishmael is blessed in a very weird way. In Genesis chapter 16 verse 12, the angel is blessing Ishmael as below. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Right from small things like washing of hands, wearing of clothes, dyeing of hairs and beards, they want to do it in the reverse. Let me quote you a hadith to show how their prophet put them in the reverse gear. Have you seen Muslim men dyeing their hairs using henna? They look like this. They fancy the orange-colored hairs and beards. Do you know how did this come about? Read these Sahih hadiths and you will know. This is from Sunnah.com. Read these hadiths. It says that the Jews and Christians do not dye their hair, so oppose them by dyeing your hairs. At the end, it's all about opposing what is natural and what is right. Speaking about the Antichrist, St. Paul writes to the Thessalonians and says one special character within him. Let me read that verse. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This is the spirit behind Islam. It has to oppose what is right and exalt its own ideology, which is in opposition to what is from God. Do you now understand why I started this video by discussing about head-on collision of cars? We are going to discuss about an even more dangerous head-on collision between two ideologies. The ideology of God versus the ideology of the Antichrist or Satan. As with any physics experiment, the impact of this collision will also be directly proportional to the velocity and the mass. In this case, the velocity is the zeal, and the mass is the number of people in it. Now it is time for us to understand who those Islamic figures are who would lead to the climax of the end of times. There are no specific teachings in the Quran about eschatology. However, Muslims have used some random sayings of the Prophet of Islam from the Hadiths to construct a story which they think is how this age will end. Let me name them. The end-time hero of Islamic empire is called as Mahdi. Mahdi is a title just like Muhammad. Muslims will call him as Mahdi alayhi salam. According to some Islamic sources, he will also be called as Muhammad, along with the Mahdi title. There is another important figure which will play a very decisive role at the end of time. That person is the Jesus of the Quran. Muslims call him as Isa alayhi salam. According to the Quran, Isa was taken up to heaven by Allah just before his crucifixion. And that same Isa will come back at this point in time to wage the final battle for this world. He will be a warrior and a miracle worker, leading the Islamic army to Jerusalem to defeat Dajjal, who is the Islamic villain of the end of times. So in short, the Islamic side would be led by a political leader by name, Mahdi alayhi salam, and a military leader with miracle-working power called as Isa alayhi salam. They have one single motive. That is to capture Jerusalem. Let us investigate and try to identify who could be this Mahdi figure of Islam. Sunan ibn Majah 4086 says that he would be a progeny of Fatima, who the daughter of the Prophet of Islam was. There is a divergence of opinion among the Shias and Sunnis regarding this. The Sunnis say that the Mahdi would be from the descendant of Hassan, whereas the Shias say that he would be the descendant of Hussein. The Sunnah of the Prophet of Islam says that this Mahdi would have a large forehead and a prominent nose. These things may sound quite unimportant for Christians, but Muslims must look at these important signs to recognize the Mahdi. However, one thing which we Christians might find interesting is that this Mahdi will rule for 7 years. Another hadith quotes that he would be a below-average Muslim who would rise to the helm of Islam in one night. His rise will be meteoric and a surprise to all in Islam. Read this hadith. This kind of verses in the hadiths have given hope to many Muslim men that they could be a potential Mahdi candidate. The recognition of Mahdi happens in a revolt that would happen in Mecca, so when they go to Mecca, they all have this thing playing in their minds. Have you noticed that Muslims are generally a very disgruntled group? They keep complaining that they are being treated with injustice and they are being oppressed. The governments of this world can do all kinds of good things to them, but they will remain the same. This is not because they are not happy for their own cause. What caused them to complain is the desire to bring their Mahdi to the scene. Read this hadith, and you will know that Mahdi would only arrive when oppression and injustice has become quite unbearable. Now let me introduce you to a person who aspired to be the Mahdi and tried to fulfill a part of the prophecy of Muhammad concerning Mahdi. Do you recognize him? He is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, whose group declared him as the end-time Khalifa. It was not just some lame claim, he indeed tried to put himself into that slot. Let me read this hadith for you. 3 will fight one another for your treasure, each one of them the son of a caliph, but none of them will gain it. Then the black banners will come from the east, and they will kill you in an unprecedented manner. Then he mentioned something that I do not remember. Then he said, when you see them, then pledge your allegiance to them, even if you have to crawl over the snow, for that is the Caliph of Allah, Mahdi. Do you notice the term black banners? Does it ring any bell to you about the black ISIS flags? Muhammad is asking his followers to pledge allegiance to the Mahdi, who will be the leader and Khalifa of the Black Banner Group. All these black flag guys of Islam with war cries belong to the apocalyptic belief system of Islam. Be it ISIS or Taliban or any other group, they are ready to kill and be killed. They have come to believe that they are the chosen ones to usher in the end of times, and their leader is the Mahdi. There is no turning back. Their brains are tuned to believe that. Please bear in mind that these ISIS guys are quite serious in their plans to get to the end times. They established their headquarters in a place called Dabiq in Syria, as they knew that the last battle would be held there. Quite a lot of their hadiths are contradictory in nature and do not fit the jigsaw puzzle. However, I will help you understand how it would play out in the end according to Islam. Let me now help you read this hadith so that you know what was the motive behind the ISIS establishing their headquarters in Dabiq. The last hour would not come until the Romans would land at Al-Amaq or in Dabiq. An army consisting of the best soldiers of the people of the earth at that time will come from Medina to counteract them. When they will arrange themselves in ranks, the Romans would say, "Do not stand between us and those Muslims who took prisoners from amongst us. Let us fight with them." And the Muslims would say, "Nay, by Allah, we would never get aside from you and from our brethren, that you may fight them." They will then fight, and a third part of the army would run away, whom Allah will never forgive. A third part of the army, which would be constituted of excellent martyrs in Allah's eye, would be killed, and the third, who would never be put to trial, would win, and they would be conquerors of Constantinople. And as they would be busy in distributing the spoils of war amongst themselves, after hanging their swords by the olive trees, the Satan would cry, "The Dajjal has taken your place among your family." They would then come out, but it would be of no avail. And when they would come to Syria, he would come out while they would be still preparing themselves for battle, drawing up the ranks. Certainly the time of prayer shall come, and then Jesus, peace be upon him, son of Mary, would descend and would lead them. When the enemy of Allah would see him, it would disappear, just as the salt dissolves itself in water, and if he, Jesus, were not to confront them at all, even then it would dissolve completely, but Allah would kill them by his hand, and he would show them their blood on his lance, the lance of Jesus Christ. Now do not ask me why they just took the place Dabic seriously and not the rest of the passage. We certainly do not have Romans in Constantinople currently. Are the Arabs assuming that the Turks are the Romans, really? Neither do we fight with swords these days. Interestingly, they seem to give the Islamic Jesus a chance to plunge a lance into the Romans. Why? Is he trying to take a revenge on the Roman soldier who thrust his side with the lance? Wow, these are the words of a 7th century warlord who could not think beyond what he saw with his own eyes. This Islamic Jesus has few other important works assigned by Allah. He will break the crosses and kill the pigs. I know it sounds funny, but then that is Islamic eschatology for you. Let me read this Sahih Hadith for you. The hour will not begin until Isa ibn Maryam comes down as a just judge and a just ruler. He will break the cross, kill the pigs, and abolish the jizya, and wealth will become so abundant that no one will accept it. This is the Messianic rule that Muslims are aspiring and desiring for. When you discuss this passage with well-versed Muslims, they will tell that the breaking of crosses and the abolishing of jizya conveys the meaning that Christians and Jews will convert to Islam en masse, and whoever resists this conversion will be put to death. In the Messianic kingdom of Isa bin Maryam, it will be Islam through and through. With Isa against Christians and Jews, along with Mahdi, who would rule the world of Islam for 7 years, you should have realized how the pieces of the chess game are set in opposition to the Christian eschatology. What I have quoted here are clear passages where the name of Mahdi and Isa is mentioned concerning eschatology. However, that is not yet. There are quite a lot of ambiguous statements made by the Prophet of Islam about end times. Many of them have already been proved as false. However, as you might already know, the Muslims will never give up believing their prophet. They would rather act to self-fulfill all those prophecies of Muhammad. There is a third person who is also an important figure in Islamic eschatology. This third person is the villain of the story. He is called as Dajjal. Muslims consider him as the epitome of all evil who will be destroyed by Isa alayhi salam. We will discuss about the third person and his clash with Mahdi and Isa in the next episode. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so, and do not forget to click on the bell icon to be notified of all our latest uploads. Till we meet again, may the Lord keep you and bless you.